I'll be talking about Ark mission, uh, basically focusing on my expeditions for the past 14 years toward Mount Ararat. My name is Varoujan Amirkhanian, and it's going to be a presentation about my field research work and personal testimony. I'll be talking about the Armenian highlands, the holy mountain of the Lord, which is part of the Armenian highlands, uh, and the secret hidden in the biblical Mount Ararat. Basically, my calling and background, as with any believer in Christ, is God has given me a heart to be a truth seeker, a truth teller, and a fighter for the truth. God also gave me the heart for research, and my background is science and engineering in medical lasers and biotechnology instrumentation, specifically for R&D. I have over 40 issued patents and many products in the field. To serve the will of God, Dr. Raymond Demedian, who was the inventor of the MRI, who received a recognition from President Reagan, quote, he said, "The highest purpose a man can find for his life is to serve the will of God." He also said or believed that rejection of God's account of creation as the foundation for our society is basic to the spiritual, social, and economic sickness of our times. Okay, so I'll be talking about a little bit about Mount Ararat. I'll give you a background, Armenian history, biblical history, and then eventually I'll jump into my expeditions for the past 14 years. So Mount Ararat is located right on the border of Armenia and Turkey, but it's in the eastern territory of Turkey, or western territory of Armenia, part of the Armenian highlands. When you are in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, Mount Ararat is visible, so you can directly see the majestic mountain. So the mountain, again, is part of the Armenian highlands, and these Armenian highlands have been basically hijacked in 1921 after the World War I. All of these territories, Western Armenia territories, have been hijacked and given to Turkey by the Russians, British, and Turkish. So Mount Ararat is not part of the Armenia, even though it belongs to Armenia. And Armenians have always protected the mountain for many, many centuries, and its secret hidden in the glaciers. This is a space photo of Ararat. It has two peaks, Lesser Ararat, or Armenians call it Sis, and the Greater Ararat, or Masis. Masis in Armenians means mother of the world. This particular frame was given to me in one of my expeditions by a tourist. Once he found out why I'm going to Mount Ararat, why am I doing these expeditions? And as it describes, it shows the barbed wire and the mountain on the other side, which has been hijacked. But also underneath in Armenian says, it will not stay like this. Let's now focus a little bit about in Bible, in Word of God, see what the old prophets like Moses said, and also what Jesus said. So Jesus, it's interesting, in John chapter 5, 46 to 47, it says, "If you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But since you do not believe what he wrote, how are you going to believe what I say?" The reason he mentioned the name of Moses, because Moses is the writer of first 5 books of the Old Testament, or Torah, which includes the creation story, the Genesis, flood, and Ark of Noah, and the survival of Noah and his family. And Jesus, in Matthew 24, 36 to 39 explains, "But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be." And then Jesus explains it's in John 10:9. He says, "I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved." So this is the good story of the salvation through Christ. He is the door, the same way that the ark saved the family of Noah, 8 members. As they went in, God himself shut the door. Yeah. And this is an analogy that our Lord Jesus Christ also makes. He says, "I am the door as well. So if you want to come to the kingdom, come through me." So as we know, again, writings have existed before Abraham and Moses, who were the initial writers of the Old Testament. Way before Abraham and Moses, which was 2165 BC. And there are many clay tablets have been discovered in Ur, city of Ur in Iraq. So these are testifying that writings have always existed, written in clays. And there are many clays that describe also the global flood, which I'm not going to go in it right now. Let me talk a little bit about the Armenian history and related to the Bible and Ararat. The first King James Bible, when it was translated in 1611, shows the country of Armenia, which is the root of the tree of the life, coming out of Noah's Ark, as it's shown in this right-hand side image, and Ark of Noah resting in Armenia or Mount Ararat. Also on the left-hand side, it shows the Babylonian tower. And it is written, first time Ararat is mentioned in Genesis 8:4. It says, "Then the ark rested in the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat." And this particular verse was also in Armenian. It says, "Ararat lernerun vrahang chetzav." Meaning it rested on the mountains of Ararat. And this Genesis 8:4 verse, I use it for Ararat 717 organization, nonprofit organization. And the website and the logo is derived from this particular verse. And the objectives of Ararat 717 are basically, number one, we like to be the watchman, the gatekeeper, and the truth tellers for the real Ark of Noah, which is positioned at northeast face of Mount Ararat. Ararat 717 organized a scientific expedition for physical characterization of the ship and its protection, as the Ark is the historical heritage of mankind on this planet, with applications to the sciences, physical and biological. And thirdly, preserve the Ark through close collaborations with international organizations and raise public awareness by scientific publications and public presentations. Okay, so let's talk about Josephus. Josephus was a first century historian, Jewish historian, who was living in Roman Empire, and he wrote about Armenia being the landing place of Ark of Noah. So besides Josephus, other historical accounts or historians that talked about Armenia are Berosus, Nicholas Damascus. We talked about Flavius Josephus, and also Eutychus, the Egyptian Arab of Alexandria. They all mention the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. Okay, so Akori or Arghuri, Yerevan. Yerevan is the capital of Armenia. Nakhichevan in Armenian means where our ancestors landed in this place. And it's interesting, Agori, the village which my ancestors come from, my great grandmother and uncles from that particular village, which was basically, there was a church, Armenian church, that got destroyed in 1840, and I will explain more in the preceding slides. And Agori or Arguri means he planted the vine. And as I mentioned, Moses is also in Armenian means the mother lies here, or the mother of the world. And also by the plains of Ararat, there is a burial place which Noah's wife, the cemetery, or has been discovered in that location as well. And Yerevan, capital of Armenia, in Armenian translates or means I can see, it's visible. As I mentioned before, Moses also is the mother of the world. And it's interesting, Iranians call Mount Ararat the Kuhe Nu, or the mountain of Noah. So this mountain of Noah is very important. Let's look at the ancestors of the Armenians. Basically, ancestors of Armenian come from the Japhetic line, which was one of the sons of Noah, through Gomer to Tiras, and to Torgom, Haik. So Haik would be great-great-grandson of Noah. And we have many proofs, and our famous historian, Moses of Choran, writes in length about Haik, who was the descendant of Noah. And Haik was cousins with Belos, or Nimrod of the Bible. And Nimrod, as we know from Bible, he was rebelling against God and building the Babylonian tower. And Haik was also helping, but then Haik, the Armenian founder, he realized that this is not the right thing to do, to rebel against God. So he took all of his family and friends and he moved toward north, toward the plain of Ararat. And then Bel, or Nimrod, was very furious, so he chased him. And then eventually there was a battle in the valley of Ararat, and Haik killed Belos. And in this particular picture, it shows the grave site of Belos with the arrow in chest for Bel. And there is also a large statue in Yerevan of Haik with bow and arrow, and basically the bow and arrow are facing toward Mount Ararat. So again, Haik, or Hayastan means the Armenia, or the land of Armenians, or the land of Haik, descendant of Noah through the Japhetic line. And as Moses of Choran, our historian, writes, again, it goes back, the era of Haik goes to 2300, 2400, a little bit after the global flood. In Armenia, we also have the Mother Church, or we call it Echmiadzin, means descent of the only begotten Son. And this name was given through a vision given to Saint Gregory the Illuminator, or Grigor Lusavoric, as Armenians call it. And he was in a dungeon for 14 years, a tyrant king who was rebelling against God. He put him in this dungeon, and after 14 years, Gregory the Illuminator basically ordained the king, and also the nation of Armenia became the first nation who accepted Christianity in the year 301 AD. And it's interesting, in the Echmiadzin Chronicles, it's written that the holy Echmiadzin, or the descent of the only begotten Son, is located not from the biblical Mount Ararat, the flood, Noah's descent from the ark, his planting of the first vineyard on the slopes of Mount Ararat, His offering of the first sacrifice, where later would be built a temple of Artemis, then an Urartian temple, then a Zoroastrian holy site, then Saint Gregory the Illuminator with his vision of the only begotten Son descending from the heaven. And it's interesting, in old maps, they always show this Mother Sea of Echmiadzin and also Mount Ararat in front of it with Noah's Ark on top. In the year 1958, they were trying to strengthen the foundation of Echmiadzin, so they were digging underneath to strengthen it. And it's interesting, they found this large fire altar underneath the church. And this place is open for visitors. I have visited 3 times there. There was a deacon, Arvan Gasparian, who in one of my visits, I believe in 2010, explained to us that on the walls there's inscription. It says that Gregory the Illuminator built the church above the altar of sacrifice of Noah. And again, Josephus, the 1st century historian, explains that Noah went forth himself with his family, sacrificed to God, and feasted with his household. The Armenians called that spot the landing place, for it was there that the ark came safe to land, and they show the relics of it to this day. Again, this is from the Echmiadzin Chronicles. And it's interesting, we have some relics in the Museum of Echmiadzin, and the most famous one is a piece of wood with a cross on it and framed with gold frame. And this particular relic or piece of wood was given by angels to Saint Jacob Mazbenetsi, Saint Jacob of Mazbenetsi, in year 318 AD, when he was an older gentleman and he was trying to climb Mount Ararat to go to Ark of Noah. And he was tired and he was sitting on a rock, and these 2 angels appeared and they gave him this piece of wood. They told him, do not climb and do not seek Noah's Ark till the appointed time, and take the wood to Echmiadzin. So it's preserved in the Echmiadzin Museum. And it's interesting, a corner of it is broken off, and it's also preserved in Russian Museum. So the old Russian map or Armenian maps, they always show Mount Ararat with Ark of Noah on top of it. They also show Garden of Eden next to Mount Ararat. And also the biblical maps, they call Ararat where the Armenian highlands are. It's interesting also in this particular image, again, it shows Yerevan or Erevan, 1683 image. It shows Mount Ararat with Ark of Noah on top of it and Echmiadzin in front of Mount Ararat. They even show Armenians, they're so proud, they also create their own currency. This was printed 500 dram, the currency of Armenians. It shows family of Noah descending from the Mount Ararat with the animals, and also it shows the Church of Echmiadzin. Okay, so I'm gonna now steer a little bit toward this Saint Jacob Monastery or Saint Jacob Church, which was destroyed in 1840 earthquake, and it's where my ancestors also come from. Actually, in that church was destroyed in 1840 earthquake, a gaseous earthquake. And the Agori village, which is at the north face of the Mount Ararat, almost 2,000 to 3,000 people perished. This Agori village was the place where Dr. Frederick Perot and Khachatur Abovian, who was a deacon from Echmiadzin, together they were trying to climb Mount Ararat, and they stayed in this particular monastery. And he writes it in his book. It's an interesting book. You can download it from internet, and it explains his journey to Ararat, and it explains that they stayed in that church, and in that church of Saint Hagop, there were many relics of Noah's Ark, and also books were preserved. And it's interesting. Also, I came across uh, Arsen Harutunian last year when I did my expedition of 2022. I spoke to Arsen Harutunian, who has written several papers. These papers are published in English, Armenian, and Russian. And they found another church at elevation of 3,100 meters. This church, the Church of Akori or Saint Hagop, does not exist after the earthquake, but it's interesting. Always Armenians built a cemetery around the church, so the khachkars or the cross stones, to this day, they exist, and they are they have the color. The color of stones are in a bright red, which are brought from Yerevan. So there's plenty. These papers are amazing, published, and it shows also in this image. It shows the Saint Hagop Monastery and also Mount Ararat. And I was also able to find some Russian maps, and it's interesting. There is a relationship between Saint Hagop Church and also Khorvirab Church, which is on the other side of the border in Armenian lands, where you can basically see it on this right image. These two churches basically they were working together, and in these Russian maps, very nicely in the 1800 Russian maps, it shows where the actual church was located, which was around 300 meters away from the actual village. And also Dr. Parrott in 1829, he also sketched the image of Mount Ararat showing the Akori village and the St. Hagop Church. And then eventually, when the 1840 earthquake happened, about 1/3 of the mountain came down in the northeast face, where now currently they call it Ahora Gorge. And it was drawn by a beach in 1845, and it shows basically on below image, it shows a large section of the Mount Ararat has come down. So from after this earthquake and the climb of Dr. Parrott and Khachatur Abovian, basically the mountain has been opened up for Westerners for exploration. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about the coat of arms. Always Armenians, this is an 1827. It shows Mount Ararat, Ark of Noah on top of it. It's interesting, even though the Mount Ararat is on the other side of the border, does not belong to Armenia, but they still in their coat of arms show Mount Ararat with Ark of Noah on top of it. Okay, so now I'm gonna steer a little bit to a different topic, which is very important topic. There's a church in Lake Van, or Eastern Turkey. This church is called Akhtamar, and it's a very majestic church. I have been there, I think 3 or 4 times. And outside of the church, the walls of the church are covered with this carvings of the Old Testament. The whole story of the Old Testament, you can see this is a Jonah story, and also it shows David and Goliath story. It's a majestic church with a lot of cemetery around it. It's in an island on Lake Van. And I didn't know, but recently a friend of mine, John Adolphi, last year he sent me this message saying George Hagopian told Alfred Lee that when he was a young man, he saw giant human remains in a church on an island in Lake Van. John Adolphi did not know which church, but I mentioned to him that it's Akhtamar because I have seen the cemetery with many khachkars. And it's interesting, he talks about these giant human remains. George Hagopian, who is George Hagopian, was a major eyewitness account. He climbed Mount Ararat twice, and he has been to Ark of Noah twice in the early 1900s, which I will talk about him later on my later slides. But he later on he explains to Dr. Alfred Lee, who is the only human being right now in the United States who has basically taken notes of John Hagopian and also Ed Davis. And I have visited him. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Alfred Lee, and I have spoken to him, which I will also talk about that particular topic. So now I'm going to shift a little bit about what happened, why the flood of Noah happened. Basically, in Bible, as we know, in Genesis 6, it's interesting, it talks about Nephilim. And who are the Nephilim? Nephilim basically are the fallen ones, fallen angels. These are sons of God, which I will explain. These sons of God basically, they mingled, they had sexual relationship with the daughters of man, and these hybrids were created, which Bible calls them giants. And these giants, basically in Genesis 6:4, it says there were giants on the earth in those days and also afterward when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them. Those are the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. It's interesting to understand who are these sons of God. Job 1:6 and Job 2:1 explains that now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. So again, this is very clear that these are fallen angels. Of course, the chief fallen angel is Satan or Lucifer. So they were corrupting the earth before the flood, and it was really people were falling into sin. And it was so bad, and God said, I'm going to destroy it because of the great wickedness of mankind. And the only person who found God's grace was Noah. And of course, I'm going to explain a little bit more about these giants. Bible explains a lot in like Numbers 13:1. It's interesting, during Moses, when Lord God spoke to Moses, told him, send men to spy out the land of Canaan. So land of Canaan, basically Moses and all the Israelites, they came out of Egypt. They were chased by the Pharaoh, which eventually they drowned in the Red Sea. And these Israelites, I don't know, maybe perhaps 1.5 to 2 million, some people estimate about 2 million Israelites, they were wandering for 40 years until God promised to take them to this land of Canaan. And this land of Canaan, it's interesting, there were giants ruling there. And First Chronicles 26 mentions that yet again there was war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature with 24 fingers and toes, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot, and he also was born to the giant. So this migration to the land of Canaan happened about 1400 after the flood, where Israelites came to land of Canaan, And again, it explains in Numbers 13:33 that there we saw the giants, or in parentheses in Nephilim, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so were in their sight. So what are these giants when they talk about this cubit? Like also in Deuteronomy 3:11, it talks about Og, king of Bashan. It says he was 9 cubits. His length are 4 cubits. Its width according to the standard cubit. And this cubit, I believe, is talking about the pyramid inches or the sacred cubit, which is 25 inches and comes up to about 18 foot. And if you put this, like Goliath being around 12, 13 foot compared to a regular human being who is 5'7", Bruce Lee in orange jumpsuit here, and then basketball player around 6'7". It shows Goliath comparison, how wide and how tall they are. There are many artifacts have been found all around the globe, but unfortunately institutions like National Geographic and Smithsonian, they are always, they try to brush off and put them under the carpet and conceal them and obscure this information. So there's a lot of corruption in institutions about the history of the earth and also about the biblical history. But the Bible is clear, has been talking about this, and many relics have been found all around the globe. You can see these large axes that are taller than human being, and also the large foot impressions on mountains have been found. Even giants in Mesopotamia, again, they talk about 9 cubits tall. These are the descendants of the Anak. You can see on this image, about 18 foot. Even American Indians, they have talked about these giants, these 6 fingers, 6 toes, who were really fast. They were running fast, and they could even pick up a buffalo and run. Um, but the giants basically roamed before the flood and after the flood, but eventually during David, because God gave commandment to David and all of his mighty fighters to basically destroy these giants in the land of Canaan, or he calls them, Lord God calls them sons of wickedness. He even not only Goliath, but David also eventually killed his brother, also who had they had these men of great stature with 24 fingers and toes, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot, and he also was born to the giant of Gath. Again, First Chronicles 17 and 20 talks about it. So there is plenty of information by L.A. Marzulli and Stefan Quell. I give all of these credits to them. You can go to their websites. I've spoken to L.A. Marzulli. These people do great research work, and they have a lot of publications, a lot of videos, a lot of books. Even a giant recently was found in Afghanistan, in Kandahar. Apparently, special forces battled with this particular giant, uh, these warriors, and he was almost, according to the interviews that L.A. Marzulli did with one of these special forces, this warrior was about 13 feet in height, and he had 6 fingers on each hand and about 2 arrangements of teeth. Okay, so much for giants. Was Noah and the pre-flood people were Neanderthals or giants? I believe they were Neanderthals, and Neanderthals are humans. I believe they have a different skeleton because they were living in the old world before the flood, which was a luscious atmosphere or luscious earth. They lived very long, as we know from Bible. These people, they had large bones, strong bones. They had large brain, and they lived long. They lived over 900 years old. But then we know that after the flood, eventually they became, they evolved because the whole earth changed, the whole atmosphere changed. Before, these people were had probably 20-30% more oxygen, and the pressure, atmospheric pressure of the earth perhaps was also different. So vegetation was different and so on. So they were able to adapt to the cold and also rugged terrain, these Neanderthals. So I believe Noah and his descendants were Neanderthals, which were, branch of the current Homo sapiens. And you can do your own research to learn more. So, okay, now let's talk about the ark. In Genesis 6:4, it's interesting when Noah was a righteous man and he found grace by God. God basically told him, "You will build this ark, which will be 300 cubits in length, 50 cubits and in width, and 30 cubits in height." And what's a cubit? We already mentioned that it's 25 inches, the sacred pyramid inches, which translates to 25 inches. And he also said that you will have windows on top or ventilations. And also there will be a side door, and there will be lower, second, and the third deck. So if we calculate the volume, this volume with 25 pyramid inches would be about 569 modern railroad tracks. Stock cars can fit inside this ark or this wooden structure, and each which can basically 40,000 animals can fit inside these railroad cars, inside the ark. So it's a large vessel. It's a large man-made vessel with 3 decks, basically, for animal storage, for food storage, bird storage, and also for where the 8 members of Noah's family also lived for over a year. Somebody again did a calculation of the size of a modern day warehouse with 150,000 square foot. Basically, the 3 decks of the Ark of Noah can fit. This particular image was shared with me with John Adolphi, and it's interesting. It's a large warehouse, and the Ark can fit in there. So basically, compared to Titanic, you can see the size of the Ark compared to a bus, school bus. Also, you can see the size of the ark. Also, it's a very stable with this box shape, rectangular box shape. It's extremely stable. You can the ark can even tilt 60 degrees, but it will not sink in an ocean. Petrified wood, I think it's important to talk about what's the condition of the ark at this moment, because petrification can happen very rapidly under cold, with no air. Extreme conditions can turn the wood to become a rock. And it's interesting, I am just basically showing a picture here, which I gathered it, but the modern day scientists, they say, oh, it takes millions of years for wood to become petrified or become rock, which is not true. Already many experiments have been done in laboratories, and they show that you can rapidly convert wood to rock. And why do I mention this? Because I will talk about George Hagopian again, because when they climbed and he went to Ark of Noah with his uncle. He said it looked like a house, a large house, and it was like a rock. They even tried to scrape with knife, and his uncle had a shotgun who shot toward the ark, but nothing happened, and it bounced back. So, okay, so now let's talk about the global flood, which happened 2500 BC, so almost 4500 years ago. And many legends or many countries talk about it. Mayans talk about it. Indians talk about it. Sumerians, Gilgamesh, even American Indians, all over the globe, I believe 180 nations, they talk about global flood. And it's interesting if we look at the ages of the patriarchs, as I mentioned, before the flood, people, because of the atmosphere of the earth, the conditions, the living conditions of the earth, people were living much longer, over 900 years. Adam, you can see it's 930, and then we had Enoch, 905, and then we had Methuselah, who was 969 years, and then eventually after the flood, you can see the ages of the patriarchs going all the way to Abraham, which is a few hundred years after the flood. Even Joseph, they dropped to about 110 years. And if we look at all of the patriarchs, again, you can see a beautiful trend. So these ages also represent of the patriarchs mentioned in the Bible. It shows a picture of what happened to the old earth and where are we now on the new earth. So, of course, the geological deposits speak volume of the global flood all over the earth, wherever you travel, including Grand Canyon. Specifically, if you go there, you can see all these geological layers stacked up rapidly. Grand Canyon is majestic, and this is, I had this particular trip or hike, which was an all-day hike, and then I show all of these things that I observed in Grand Canyon. You can even see collect seashells on Mount Ararat or Massis in the valley of Ararat. A friend of mine met in Emelec, whom I always climb together, Mount Ararat. He has found these shells. I think the biggest testimony is when you look at from a satellite point of view, when you look at Earth, majority of it looks blue. And we know almost 2/3 of the earth is covered by water. So where do all these waters come from? It's a great testimony of how the global flood was. Okay, so I had a opportunity to travel to Creation Evidence Museum last year after my Ararat trip. Creation Evidence Museum is in Glen Rose, Texas. And it's built right next to a large cemetery, dinosaur cemetery. And the founders of this church are basically scientists, creation scientists, who display this 1/28 scale of the replica of the Ark. It shows the decks, it shows all the room compartments, it shows Mount Ararat, Khorvirab, and all the eyewitness accounts. And it's interesting also in this Creation Evidence Museum, this replica, it shows two water tanks on both ends of the Ark, on the bow end and also on the stern end. And they have a patent. Dr. Carl Bow, one of the founders, one of the scientists, he has a patent on this, and it shows that these water tanks, basically, they supply water to the animals, and also it acts like a dampening for the amplitude dampening for stability of the ship. So for both end of it, during when there are large waves, so the ark would be balanced in a very ferocious ocean body of waters. And there's also a stair in the bow end of the ship, which basically I will talk more about this, which they say that early Christian pilgrims they built it, and perhaps these stairs were the ones that George Hagopian eventually climbed on top of the ark, on the roof of the ark, and he saw the large hole through these stairs. And also, they preserve many relics in this museum of dinosaurs, many eggs. So it's an amazing, amazing place to go to visit. And they defend it again, large eggs of dinosaurs, and they show the geologic column as you enter through the entrance of the museum. It's a museum. And they also, last year when I visited, because one of my friends, this John Adolphi, after my expedition, August expedition, he asked me to come to this museum and meet Dr. Alfred Lee and Carl Bao, to be able to present also to them. And that day, Dr. Alfred Lee was also presenting about George Hagopian. This is very early in 1960s and 70s. George Hagopian basically explaining to Dr. Alfred Lee about him going to Ark of Noah in two occasions in the early 1908, 1910. And Dr. Alfred Lee basically gave him light tests and also interviewed him many, many times. And he basically, Dr. Alfred Lee, his specialty is illustrative painter, and he painted the Mount Ararat and Ark of Noah. And it's interesting, these images have been used for majority of the Hollywood movies when they want to show Mount Ararat and Ark of Noah. So I had an opportunity to eventually have a private meeting with them, and I also presented my field studies and my imagery. I shared them with them, and we became friends. It was great to meet Dr. Alfred Lee. He is full of knowledge. He has also done a lot of expeditions himself to Mount Ararat. They have done it with a helicopter with Dr. Carl Bao. And he has many great stories from that mountain and what George has told him about the Armenian genocide and so on, which is a different topic. But again, we became friends, and I shared all of my expeditions with him, and we had a confirmation together that where I am going and where I am taking photos are the same ones that they also did in the 1970s era. So let's keep this picture. Now I'm going to focus, go into Mount Ararat. Let's keep this picture in mind where a large ship would have a bow in front, the stern would be on the back, and then starboard side. So this is important. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit about past eyewitness accounts. I think I list 4 of them, and these are basically explained in many books, but the particular book that I will refer is called Noah's Ark Fact or Fable. It's written by Violet Cumming, and you can order this book from Amazon. It's a very small book, but has a lot of wisdom, information, and knowledge in this book. So first one is Haji Yeram. It happened in 1856, where he was a shepherd boy with his father. Basically, 2 scientists or 3 scientists, I'm sorry, they wanted to go to Ark of Noah, so they took them in 1856 to Ark of Noah. And then they were amazed when they saw Ark of Noah, and they ordered Haji and the father under threat of death to keep quiet about the Ark. And then Haji Yeram eventually moved to America and told the story to a Seventh-day Adventist, Pastor Harold Williams in 1920 when he was at age of 82 years old. And it's interesting, these 2 of these scientists, I believe one of them in the United States and one of them in England, they admitted and confessed in their deathbed that they have seen Ark of Noah. The other major eyewitness account is John Joseph Nouri in 1887. He was a deacon from Babylon. Eventually, after third attempt, he was able to go to the Ark. And he explained it, that he saw the two sections, the back end and the front end, at around 16,000 feet elevation. And interestingly, this particular eyewitness account, the story was published in Chicago Tribune. And he wanted to bring this story or the relics or the remaining of the Ark to United States for a great world exhibition. So now we talk about George Hagopian, which is the major eyewitness account. As I explained, in 1900 and 1905, he was about 8 years age. With his uncle, he went to the Ark, and they were from one region. And he explained to Dr. Alfred Lee, these are the particular values that he explained. Angle out sides of the Ark. The Ark was resting on a very long ledge. Ark was covered with green moss, and there were no opening on the starboard side. And it was very precipitous ledge, and there was a large hole on top of the ship. And also he explained to Dr. Alfred Lee that the way he traveled, they always asked him, okay, where is it located? He said, I can take you there. But the way he explained it, basically they passed by Saint Hagop grave, and also as we know, the Saint Hagop Monastery does not exist, but close by there is a well that exists there, and also the grave of Saint Hagop exists. So that he explained to Dr. Efradi that they passed by that area. And then the last one that I will talk about is 1916 to 1917 Russian expeditions, which happened during Tsar Nicholas II, who authorized, after a pilot during World War I, where a pilot was roaming around, flying around the mountain at around 14,000 feet, he saw the Ark. And then he eventually explained to Tsar, and Tsar approved that 100 soldiers to climb Mount Ararat. And they climbed from both sides. They eventually got to the Ark. They took measurements. They took photographs. But eventually, when they came down, the Bolsheviks in 1917, Bolsheviks basically massacred most of these soldiers, and then some of them survived. Some of the relatives eventually ended up in United States, specifically Alexander Kur, who interviewed some of the relatives. He basically published it in Russian in 1945, and then in 1946 he sent the details of these eyewitness accounts to Earl Cummings. It was eventually published in Violet Cummings' book. And there was this particular photo is from a movie which Hollywood made it from in regards to the Russian expeditions. And this Alexander Kur also talks about the St. James or St. Hagop Monastery in the northeast face of the mountain on the Agori village. So how do you climb Mount Ararat? Now I'm going to focus on my expeditions. So basically, you climb Mount Ararat from the south face of the mountain, close to city of Dugubayazet. So you start somewhere around 2,200 meters you go with a van there, and then they park with horses and so on. So you climb to 3,100 meters. It's the first base camp, and the second base camp is at around 4,200 meters. And then eventually, third day, you get to the summit of Ararat as you climb all night, which is 5,165 meters. So basically, base camp and base camp 1 and 2. Horses can go up to base camp 2. And base camp 2 is very rugged. There are many boulders there, and it's not easy to camp there. And then in the evening, of course, early evening, around 12 midnight, you start climbing toward the summit. And then you get to the summit very early morning, perhaps 5 to 6 o'clock. And you want to get there early morning because, again, the glaciers are frozen and it's much safer to get there because then you have to come back all day. So again, I had an opportunity in 2008 and 2011 with my Armenian and Russian friends. I had the opportunity to climb Mount Ararat, again from the south side, Dugubayazet side. We went all the way to the summit area, and then in 2011 I had an opportunity to go opposite of the summit, to cross the saddle and go to the peak number 4, which I show here in 2011. And then on that peak, which I call it line of sight, is I was able to take photographs overlooking Ahora Gorge toward the Armenian side or the northeast side. And then in the year 2010, so I became basically to the Ark mission started in the year 2010 after I entered from the back door. After my 2008 climb, I had an opportunity to talk to Gareth Alton in Holland, who was collaborating with this NAMI group of Hong Kong, and they were looking for an Armenian person to be able to go to Armenia because they basically discovered some sort of a man-made structure, wooden structure on the mountain, in a cave on the mountain, and they wanted to see if Armenia would verify that this particular place is Noah's Ark or not. So again, I got connected with them, and then eventually I ended up going to Hong Kong for their press conference, where all of these Kurdish and Turkish delegations or climbers were present in Hong Kong, and also eventually we drove to Beijing, and they were presenting. And then Gareth Alter, you can see I'm standing right next to him. I took this photo with Panda Lee, who was the main climber, Hong Kong NAMI climber. So I met these people, and they presented their findings, what they found in those caves. And then I had an opportunity eventually to go to Ma Wan Park, which is a large one-to-one scale of the Ark built in Hong Kong. Amazing place. I would highly recommend people to travel there and visit this particular Ark. But there were nothing mentioned about Armenia, how the Armenians been involved in preserving, safeguarding the Ark for many, many centuries. So I was a little bit disappointed, and I even mentioned to the founders of this museum that they need to include some Armenian stories as well, because again, the Armenians have been preserving, have been safeguarding, have been the guardians or gatekeepers of the Mount Ararat and the Ark of Noah. They eventually asked me even to take them to Yerevan, so I had an opportunity. We went to Yerevan in 2010. We went to Echmiadzin. We went to Khorvirab, which is overlooking Mount Ararat. They took many photos. We met many scientists, and also we also met with Ashot. Dr. Ashot, who is the head of the history department, Ashot Melkonian, Dr. Melkonian, who has also climbed. This middle picture shows me standing next to him with a white shirt, Dr. Ashot Melkonian. And they were very amazed with their finding, with the NAMI's finding, but they were not, we were under impression, and they were not telling us exactly where this cave or their wooden structure is, and they kept on. Ashot Melkonian talked about the saddle and the northeast face above Ahura Gorge, and they basically nodded their head, saying yes, 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 but they would never tell us exactly where it was. And then eventually I had an opportunity the same year, 2010, the Hong Kong team came to Los Angeles, and in UCLA we had an opportunity to have a joint presentation, and I met this gentleman in white shirt called his name is Clifford Paiva, part of the BSM research. And Clifford Paiva was also from Backdoor collaborating. He's a ARC researcher, a major researcher in that field, and he was collaborating with also NAMI because NAMI also interviewed him. And then after this UCLA meeting, we became friends. Me and Clifford became friends, and for 3 years we were basically talking, about NAMI and where is their location. But unfortunately, we would not receive any information from NAMI organization. Where is their location? But then eventually, some few photos, images came from Amy Beam in internet showing from the Red Canyon region, which is below 4,200 meters, and I passed by this site in the years of 2008 and 2011, and I've taken photographs of it. So you can see my photo also in 2015. I took a photo of this section. And this particularly shows a kind of a man-made wood coming out of this cave, collapsed cave. And it's exactly where Panda Lee showed in their famous picture. So this particular frozen cave, it shows a man-made structure. And these are photos that I took it. So this particular thing, eventually we learned that this is a man-made structure. I don't know how correct they are. It could be an ancient animal structure, animal barn, which has been collapsed. It is not the ark. There's only one ark, so this is not the real Ark of Noah. Even Turkish government on the other side of the Mount Ararat, in the valley of Ararat, there is this place called Durupinar, eventually, which is a geological land formation. They call it an Ark of Noah. Ron Wyatt even called it an Ark of Noah. And he said, this is the real Ark of Noah. They have a little building right next to it. It says Noah's Ark National Park. But again, this is not the Ark. There's only one Ark. And then we have some American researchers, archaeologists, geologists. They also did a lot of expeditions to Mount Ararat in the years 2011 all the way to 2014, 2015, and they were digging on top on peak number 4, opposite of the summit area. I even had an opportunity in 2011. I took a photo of their expedition site, their digging site, and they were digging about 14 feet underneath the ice, and they had found some, I don't know, some charcoal, and they were thinking that they were the remains of the Noah's Ark. But again, this is not the Ark. Okay, so 2011, from the line of sight, I had an opportunity to I took a photo above the Ahura Gorge. Okay, so this is my line of sight overlooking that particular area above the Ahura Gorge at around this red area is close to about 15,500 feet elevation. And line of sight also is dangerous where you stand and take photos. So you have to be very careful because these cornice hazards or danger sites build up. from the snow, but underneath could be empty. So you have to be careful where you're standing. So anyway, I brought these pictures of 2011. They were with a low resolution camera. And as we zoom in, we see some shadowy image sitting on an imbricate ledge, on a long ledge. And we believe this is the Ark of Noah. I chose the starboard side and the top roof side of it. And Clifford Paiva was also monitoring the satellite imagery of the Google Earth, the digital globe. And he was with all the old eyewitness accounts, historical accounts. He was basically monitoring the satellite imagery of where the ark is, with a large hole on top of the roof, which was sitting on an imbricate ledge. And then working with him, I eventually created a new website of Ararat 717 in 2014. I posted the same coordinates, and the same coordinates were masked or obscured 6 days later from my publication in the website. And you can see Google Earth Digital Globe, they did some sort of a algorithm with their software, and it's kind of a smooth, they show a smooth surface specifically for the coordinates of the ark. So it was kind of disappointing what they did, but this is before, originally in 2013 of the Google Earth, and then 2014 where they obscured it. But this was their action of these powers that be. Basically, it opened up our expeditions. So this is another masked or obscured view of the mountain from peak number 4, where the line of sight is, compared to where originally we were looking at the satellite imagery. Okay, so we had the coordinates. We know where the St. Hagopian Church of the 1840, when it was completely destroyed, is from the khachkars, or from the cross stones. And we know from the old literatures, Armenian literatures, that Khor-Virab and this church was basically, they were working together, and they were on the same line. So perhaps Khor-Virab, St. Hagopian Church, and our coordinates are in the same line. And since the obscuration of Google Earth Digital Globe happened in 2014, then I decided in 2014 to basically not rely on satellite imagery, obscuration of the satellite imagery, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go and take photos again from the same line of sight. So in 2015, I joined a group of Armenians, young guys. We went to the summit, and then I separated myself through the saddle. I went to the peak number 4, and I started taking photos. And then I brought this imagery and basically compared it to the Google Earth NGA, which was masked, and I did the triangulation, and basically I was able to pinpoint exactly where the ark should be sitting in the glaciers. And when you zoom it in and you compare it with the Google Earth imagery, basically it sits on this imbricate ledge, and it's the measurement or the glacial signatures also look the same, and also the measurements of the ledge are very much the same. So I knew that this is where the arc zone is. And in 2016, I had to do another confirmation from another line of sight. So I climbed with my friend, a Kurdish friend from the north side of the mountain. And we went up to around 3,800, close to 4,000 meters. And it was a clear day. And I was fortunate enough to be able to zoom in with my 60x camera to be able to take another photo of the bow end of the ark zone or the ark. And if you zoom in, there is a frozen lake right next to it. And this, this picture that I took, I was really fortunate because I did a lot of. It was very cloudy that moment, and I was fortunate enough to be able to capture this image. And this image, when you clean it up, it even shows the frozen lake in yellow circle. And also where the bow of the ark is sitting on that diamond shape. Here's another view of the frozen lake from the peak number 4 line of view. And I will talk more about this. And you can see from peak number 4 below image on the left hand side is the 2015, and 2016 is from another line of sight showing the bow of the ark. And if I basically, it perfectly correlates these two images of 2015 and 2016 to the GE, Google Earth Digital Globe image of 2014. And you can see even the glacial cuts or the profiles are also perfectly matching to the Google Earth Digital Globe. So. And then 2015, if I zoom it in, we could see the ark stern and the starboard side. Even the bottom of the ark was visible. And if I zoom it in, you can even see the middle section of the ark was broken. You could see the decks. And eventually a mesh structure, a large mesh structure, possibly a cage, is shown in here. And this particular arc zone is basically from where we put our crampon to go toward the summit. If you go toward the below, overlooking the Ararat Gorge, is around 900 meters to the arc zone. And here is a correlation of 2015 and 2016 with all the glacial cuts. And also from a friend of mine took this photo from Yerevan, from Echmiadzin, and it shows also the ark sitting on that diamond-shaped ice or the imbricate ledge. This particular image was taken compared to the 2011. I'm comparing it with the 2015. And you can see a large chunk of the ice, the glacial ice, was broken off in 2015. And it's interesting, when I was standing there in 2015, from my line of sight, the whole glacial signature looked really damaged and did not look the same as 2011. So I was wondering, did man caused it or something natural happened? And then later on, I found out that perhaps there was some sort of a cluster bombing of the northeast face of the mountain. And one of my Kurdish friends confirmed it. He said it happened in 2014 when the Turkish Air Force was basically bombing or trying to destroy the PKK groups hiding in the caves. And perhaps this action, whether it happened man-made, naturally, or man-made, it caused the breaking of the glacier and created this little pond above it. You can see it on the right-hand side, 2015 image. And that was the reason which basically caused the back end of the ark to come out of the ice, and it showed up. So you can see the shadow here on the right-hand side, sitting on that diamond-shaped imbricate ledge, is where the ark is. And so I, looking at the two, from the two sides, or from two line of sights, so you can see the back end and the front end of the ark in 2016 and 2015. And basically the whole ship was sitting in this ledge with the ark being broken in the middle. And also, if you basically measure the stern and the bow of the ship. You can see there both of them are angled out or the same. So these are the two line of sights, yellow from the peak number 4, and the green arrow shows 2016, which is basically taking the bow of the ship. And again, zooming in, two different years, 2017, 2018. I believe this frozen lake is very significant, very important, because George Hagopian in early 1900, with his uncle, who was the deacon of Van, when they climbed, the uncle said, "Yeah, it's time for me to show you the Ark." And it was a hot summer day, and they knew it. And the way he knew it is because this large lake, frozen lake, is visible from the bottom of the mountain. So when you see this large lake, then you can perhaps possibly see the Ark as well. So what do you take with you for an expedition? Basically, it becomes really heavy, so you have to have good hiking shoes. Mount Ararat is an easy mountain to climb. You have your axe and also your walking sticks, your, of course, sleeping bag, and a lot of warm clothes. I have my drone. In 2018 I took it there, and then harness and some ropes and so on. So it becomes heavy, and also all the chargers, phone chargers, drone chargers becomes heavy. Every little thing that you pack it in your backpack, you must be lightweight, otherwise it will drag you, and you will get tired in those cold temperatures and high elevation. So the most important part is my DSLR camera, which I always take 2 of them. You can see this is from top of a mountain in Southern California, and I'm trying to zoom on the left-hand side to that water tank. And if I zoom in with my DSLR 60x camera, I can really bring it close up, and we can see this water tank on the right-hand side, a large water tank, or the same thing I can do from the bottom of a mountain. And if I focus and zoom into those antennas, you can see on the right hand side, I can clearly see the dishes attached to the antennas on the top of the mountain. Or this particular photo was taken in Onion Valley, again in California. If I want to focus that particular ice or snow cap, again, you zoom it in next to the lake, and then eventually I can bring it in close up, and all the details are visible. Again, focusing on my line of sight. So 2022 I climbed with my friend Metin, and I had an opportunity to raise an American flag on the summit. And then we moved toward peak number 4, which is the opposite of, again, the summit. And it took us around 35-40 minutes to get there. The terrain was very rugged. It was not the same as 2011 and 2015. I don't know, a lot of things had changed. So that's why it was very dangerous. So it took us a long time to get there. And then finally, when I got there, I was using both of my cameras to take photos overlooking the Ahura Gorge toward the Ark Zone area, and zooming in that area. And then you can see on the left-hand side, opposite, I'm also taking a photo of the summit where people arrived there. We basically climbed together, and we got to the summit very early morning before the sunrise, around 4:30, 5 o'clock. And then we got to the peak number 4, around 35-40 minutes after. And the sun came out, and it was a beautiful weather, so it gave me clarity to take these beautiful photos. And also Metin was taking shots from behind, so he surprised me. So this is the area that I'm zooming in. And then this is a comparison photo from 2015, because since 2015 I did not have any other photos, even though I went 2016 and 2018. I wanted to know what happened to the stern to the starboard side of the ark, the back end, which was the broken end, the first half of the ark. So you can see these are the comparison photos between 2015 and 2022. Again, this one shows the 2022 above Ahura Gorge in comparison to the digital globe. So the actual frozen lake is showing up, but of course the arc coordinates are obscured or masked. And then if I zoom in this region compared with 2015, again you can see the red box that I am showing is basically where the arc zone is, next to the frozen lake. And I show with the arrows where the actual frozen lake is compared to the mountain right above the Ahura Gorge. Again, sitting right on that diamond-shaped ledge. And then comparing the arc zone and the glacial signatures from 2015 to 2022, you can see how the terrain has changed and collapsed. And unfortunately, now the back end of the arc is basically sitting at around 45-degree angle. Again, this is a zoomed in area of the arc zone. And this is the terrain. Again, you can see how damaged this area is. And it seems like this ledge, this frozen ledge, has been under the pressure and has collapsed. So I was able to capture two ends, the section 1 and section 2, which again shows the damaged stern portion, the starboard side. And then down below it shows the arc, the roof portion of the, and I put some edges, some line to show basically where the actual arc is, the position, the condition of the arc. And there are two holes on the stern, or damaged area on the stern side of it. And this is the broken edge of the sections 1 and 2. And again, if you just basically measure these lines, the height and width of it basically comes up to around 0.6, which is the same as the biblical height and width ratio of 0.6. So this is a man-made structure, and this is the ark exactly sitting at the Google Earth digital globe masked coordinates. Broken section and also some other debris are shown here in yellow circles. And if I zoom it in, you can see a big chunk of the stern portion has been broken off on the back side of the ark. These are the large-scale debris fields below the section 2 of the ark. So this particular picture shows the whole thing again with a different lighting. So if we compare it with 2015, again, the whole ledge has collapsed, and the arc, back end of the arc now is sitting at 45-degree angle. And again, if we measure the bow end and the stern end, compare 2015, 2016, the height and width are again showing 0.6. So we know this is the ark. So, okay, now Ark of Noah reveals God's truth about the second judgment, because we are basically looking at what happened in the old world and where are we in the new world. And as it's explained in 2 Peter 3, it's in verse 5, it says, "For this they willfully forget that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of water and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. But the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up." So again, the Ark of Noah is right in the center, in between the old world and the new world. Old world being judged by the water, and as the Bible says, the new world will be judged by fire.
In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. On this mountain the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats and the finest of wines. On this mountain he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations."
I believe the Isaiah chapter 2 and 25 are basically talking about the last days, how the mountain of the Lord is going to be revealed to the whole world, and everybody is going to rush into the mountain. So what is next? As you can see in these images, for the past 5 years, when I climbed in 2008, 2011, even 2015, we were always climbing in secret. The mountain was not as open as now. But this last 2022 climb that I did, there were hundreds of climbers from Iran, from Armenia, from Eastern Europe. They were all climbing, so the mountain has been opened. This particular thing was published recently that you can see Turkish military is trying to build a military site on the south face of the mountain at around 2,100 meters. So it's interesting. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult to be able to go to the line of sight, because the Turkish military now probably is going to check every climber with permits. So in 2018, also I had an opportunity with my friend of mine, American friend of mine, Rob Jacobson. We climbed together. We were planning to, of course, send a drone to go to the Ark Zone area, but unfortunately the drone, the weather conditions were really bad and the drone did not go much higher. You need much bigger drones like this one, which is around $13,000-$14,000. But unfortunately, you won't be able to carry this on your backpack. And even if you were able to carry it in your backpack, when you fly it over there at the northeast face, I believe the Turkish government, Turkish military will shoot it down. In 2018, we had a interesting climb with my friend, as I said, with Rob Jacobson. We prayed on the mountain. Before we went to the mountain, we even prayed in Armenian Genocide Memorial in Armenia. And then on the mountain, several times we prayed it to the courts of heaven for the return of the Armenian highlands to its original people, the Armenians. Of course, there was no date given to us, but we prayed with conviction, knowing that our Lord God is working something in the background, and something is going to happen in our lifetime. So we continue to pray. And we know God tells us in Isaiah 55 that my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And also in Isaiah 14:24, it's interesting. It says, the Lord of hosts has sworn, saying, surely as I have thought, so it shall come to pass, and as I have purposed, so it shall stand. I am basically a soldier of God's kingdom, and I basically take orders from Him for all of my expeditions. And I follow him obediently and faithfully, and he is the commander-in-chief, and in his due time, he's going to reveal the mountain to the whole world. I give special thanks to my family who have been supporting me all these years, going to Mount Ararat for my expeditions. Without their support, I'm nothing. I thank my spiritual friend Rob Jacobson, who accompanied me in the year 2018 for the climb, and also he always prays for me. Metin Amalek, who is my great friend and brother, who always helps me. Together we climb Mount Ararat. Varoujan Amirkhanian, who also helps me with all of the Ararat 717 website issues, and the Ark prayer team. So thank you very much for your attention.